Hey, this is Spanner for the Spanner Rink Show. We're here for another exciting episode. We're going to talk a little North Dakota high school sports and should they be the emphasis of recruiting here in the NCAA out west schools here in North Dakota, and the kind of the tale of the two schools there. So, but we're ready for another one. Let's go.
And here we are with the college segment. We wanted to dive into a little bit of recruiting. We want to touch on some Northern Sun, and of course, we want to touch on the rivalry between UMary and Minot State, which I've known for all too well on my side, both as a student, as being able to witness it. I witnessed it in 2005 when Mary made the jump, and of course when Minot State made the jump to Division II, and then of course, the addition of hockey. But the way it's been, it just seems like, for whatever reason, it's these two schools who are locked at the hip for a rivalry. I think as a whole, and this is probably going to get some people complaining about it or maybe not liking it, is these two schools I feel like have struggled as an institution athletically to make breakthroughs. Now, of course, you give your soccer a little bit of props, and give Merkin a little bit of props there a couple times for his basketball team, and then
we went to 5 tournaments though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Won 3 conference titles.
Absolutely.
But baseball's done well. Haven't got to the NCAA tournament. No. They won a conference title.
But consistently across the board, I have felt like we maybe haven't gotten it. I don't know if maybe it's just we look at some of their struggles on certain sports more than we look at the overall as a whole. But what are your thoughts? Because I just feel like both teams, Mary made the jump way too early, and they didn't left Minot State in the DAC for it seems like another 5-6 years before Minot State made the jump. But the other problem I feel like is is it because certain sports have struggled that they panic, they try to recruit kids that whatever, or should they be taking the organic approach? Let's recruit and develop, get that thing in motion so that your seniors are going to be elite and those freshmen aren't going to start right away, but you prepare for them for their junior and senior years. Because I think, too, and like hockey is, I don't want to overstep, but hockey, we're lucky because we've got junior hockey. So a lot of these kids who are really good high school kids, I'd always encourage them to play a year or two of junior hockey, and then they came to me. And that's where my biggest success of local kids. All my best local kids that I had played at least a year or two of junior hockey before they got to come to me, and then they were able to take it. Lots of great examples that I've got from my own guys. I just feel like that's maybe not happening with other sports, especially with like homegrown talent, and maybe that's evolving with our discussion. But what are your thoughts?
Well, one issue, and in the top Division II teams around the country are all near a metropolitan area. There's no metropolitan area. And the coaches, they'll tell you there's no metropolitan area. And that's an issue because now you're putting all your scholarship money into faraway recruits and all in your starting lineup. And if you're playing like a collision sport like football, if you lose a few, then you're dead where you stand. Mm-hmm. My issue with Mary and Minot and their jump, and Mary's put a big emphasis on recruiting North Dakota kids, is their retention. And it isn't so much the retention of starting or their best freshmen. It's the retention of role players that has really hurt them because it's, then you get a revolving door of role players.
Yep.
And so in my travels, there are players. There are good athletes in rugby. There are good athletes in Castleton. There are good athletes in Carrington. There are good athletes in these towns, Garrison and Washburn and Beulah and Hazen, that Grafton, clearly, right? A girl foregoing her senior year.
Absolutely.
And then obviously in the Class A towns, there are good athletes that can play. I think if we recruited the Bees, Mary and Minot, and I say we because we're North Dakota guys, right? We're rooting for these schools.
Yep.
They recruited these schools. They're better off with that kid. It's a monumental jump from Region 3, whatever, to the Northern Sun. We all know that. So but getting a kid from Beulah that sticks it out to their junior year is going to be better than having a kid, from Florida or California that leaves after their freshman year. Mm-hmm. Or keep them. But it's the role,
So are you seeing a trend? I mean, obviously, there's no secret. I mean, all sports, especially not Division One. I mean, we're talking some of these things that there's a retention issue that you're alluding to, the fact that these kids, but I mean, there's a lot of kids that don't even stick it on their first semester. I mean, kids are gone, and is it a lack of development? Is it a lack of expectations?
Well, I mean, think about this. If you're from Arizona or Florida,
yep,
and you're recruited and you're a role player on a tiny scholarship, because the bulk of your money is with your starting lineup, right? Are you going to live in Minot, North Dakota?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, that's a hard sell.
I know.
Well, I believe that there are good athletes all over North Dakota. Madden Thorson, one of the best athletes in North Dakota. He's going to Moorhead. He's leaving our state. That's the kind of kid we got to get. We got to get that kid, develop that kid. That kid could be a good, above the level, a slightly downhill Northern Sun athlete, come, junior and senior year. And the same goes for soccer. The same goes for basketball. The same goes for all of these sports. We, develop the best athletes in North Dakota because they'll stick it out. Think about this. If you recruit a kid, we're talking the role players. For the most part, I feel like our coaches have done a decent job with young kids that have started. Okay. Role players.
Yep.
Okay? You fly out to see them. How many times? 2, 3? Right? Okay?
Yeah.
And maybe you were in Wichita or San Diego or Virginia, whatever. I don't know where all the showcases are. I can list them off for soccer.
Yep.
But I don't know the showcases for all the others. So say you fly out 2 or 3 times. Then maybe you fly the kid in. Maybe not all the role players get flown in. Let's say a third of them or half of them. It doesn't matter. Yep. Okay? Then they go to fall camp or spring training or whatever, right? So you're putting meals into them. You're putting dorm rooms into them because the school's paying for that, not the kid, in the extra time, right?
Yep.
Okay? Your season starts, right? You're putting in practice reps. You're putting in individual reps outside of practice. You're putting gear on them. You're putting swag on them. Okay? If they're a role player, they're probably on the bus, right?
Yep.
So you're putting meals into them, hotels in them, and if they leave before they made an impact, then you're going to go through that process again.
Over and over and over again.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The most precious resource, most coaches say, is money or recruiting money or budget money or whatever. The most precious resource is the athlete. The athlete is the most precious resource. And you can go and do a million different levels in there, making sure their mental welfare is being taken care of, the social side's taken care of, the athlete side's taken care of, the housing and friendship, all that stuff. And that's for another discussion. I don't think that any of that's bad.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just talking about we haven't been able to retain, and this is both schools, the role players.
Which is big, though. I mean, I don't know how you construct a soccer roster, but as a hockey one, as an example, you've got 12 forwards, 60, and a goalie, essentially, and 2 goalies. You don't want 12 skilled players to play. You don't want 6 skilled defensemen. You want to have a mix. When you say role, I think grit, toughness, in hockey, your third and fourth lines, you want grit, toughness. And that's, 9 times out of 10, that's the DNA of a kid in North Dakota. I could tell you so many kids, that we had, that Brett Fiddler and Donnie Iverson and Kyle Stevens, who were local guys, and even Morgan Martell, defenseman, gritty kids that were just absolutely gritty. And that's what led to our success. Now, soccer, you obviously want skill, but you want some toughness, right? You want
we got to have toughness. We got to have, we got to have some
players?
Tarzans, and you want Janes.
Yes.
But it's not just that. Like, and hockey's a little different, but I don't know the dynamic of first line, fourth line.
Yep.
So I'm not going to sit there. I mean, you'd have to describe that. But in soccer, like in the first half, you pull a kid out, you can't re-enter him.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
So just depending on the score, the
Wow.
game, you have 2 games of the weekend, 1 game of the weekend. So your role players
Something
might
every day, I tell you.
Yeah. So it's the time they get is going to be less.
Yep.
So it's hard. Let's say football, for example, you've got, say you start with 3 wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, if you're going to spread a team out with the 4th or 5th wide receiver,
Yep.
you're not really spreading them out if the 4th and 5th wide receiver aren't good.
No,
So they got to be pretty good.
Yep.
But they're not. If your base lineman is is 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a running back, so they're not out there very much. Okay.
For sure.
If your base alignment is 3 wide receivers, tight end, and a running back,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and you often spread them out. Your backup running back is a role player.
Yep.
Your fullback isn't on very often because you got the 3rd wide receiver instead of a fullback and a and a tailback, right? Maybe your halfback is only getting your tailback. No one calls it halfback anymore.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe your tailback is only getting half the carries because you have a running quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe oftentimes you're putting the fullback in as the tailback, and
Yep.
and his lead blocking, behind the tight end for the for your quarterback, or you know what I'm saying? Like,
so here then what's the root of what do you think the root of the problem is? Because like you talk about development, like here's a perfect example. Our Minot State kid that drafted into the NFL started off as a wide receiver, all of a sudden revolves to tight end to offensive line and goes. Best example, I think, in my history at Minot State, in terms of athletics, was Tyler Rudolph. So I got a call from Matt Merkin at like 4 o'clock on a Friday, and nobody was in the office, and he's like, "Hi, I got a kid coming in from Bismarck. Is there anybody around tomorrow on a Saturday? I know it's tough." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll show up. I'll be here." He's like, "Oh, great. Could you give him a tour and show him around?" "Absolutely, I will." And so just me, Tyler, and his dad, we went and walked around, blah, 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 did a little thing and everything. I mean, Matt can't say that this is a surefire, going to be the best basketball player to ever play at Minot State. No, he's a good player, and he needs a lot of work, and he did it the right way, and it was like his sophomore year, it started to click, junior year, dominant, and I mean...
So I was coaching during those years,
yeah.
And we walked out of our team room, out into the gym, and I pointed out Tyler Rudolph working.
Oh, he was always there.
Okay.
Always there.
And then we did it again and again and again. And I told my team, I was like, this is what it takes. And he was a good example.
There.
And our team was super talented. We were super good. We were in the NCAA tournament. But after I did that, they started doing personal running and personal workouts, away from the coaches. We went undefeated the next year. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to give you my solution here. I believe not all, it doesn't mean all your role players, you don't have to, whatever.
Yep.
I believe that Minot and Mary and Valley City, and, they're, for the most part, those smaller universities are recruiting North Dakota kids. They should have a base of local kids so they can, that can progress, even if they only dominate or do well their senior year. They need older kids. They need leaders. They need kids that understand North Dakota. They need kids that take kids from out of state home for Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. That was one of the biggest things. I always kept the Minot kids on my team. I played the Minot kids. We had Bismarck kids on our team. And they took our kids home for Thanksgiving. They took our kids home for Easter. It's a big part of the student-athlete experience. And the North Dakota kids will stick it out.
You're absolutely, I completely agree. And I think, things are obviously a little different for you and I when you're going for it every year, as opposed to rebuilding. And I've been a part of rebuilds and I've witnessed rebuilds. But when you're going for it, it's a little bit different. But I know that for me, and I think it feels like in all sports, when you get to like tournament time, conference tournament, NCAA tournament, your best players are almost always going to be seniors. There's just something about that extra juice, last kick at the can. Probably the best senior.
Well, they don't fear anymore. They're not fear
Nope.
about getting hurt
Nope.
anymore. I saw kids diving for headers because there's only a few games left, and they won an extra game. Mm-hmm. We always talked about it. Bonus games.
Yeah.
We want bonus games. So beginning of the season, you get 18 games or whatever. We're like, seniors, you got 18 games left in your career. Juniors, you got 36 games left in your career. How hard are you going to play? You got sophomores, you got 54 games left in your career. And then the girls are like, no, bonus games. Or do we have them? Right now, we don't have them. Mm-hmm. We gotta win some games, and we start clinching those bonus games. So, and then every time you get into the playoffs, now you want another bonus game?
Yeah.
And who's going to show up? Seniors show up.
And ironically enough, one of the best senior performances that I've ever been a part of, married a soccer girl of yours, Mr. Dan Lamb, and he was absolutely
Mariana Dana, first All-American for Minot State soccer.
Tournament MVP at our national 2013 chat. He was possessed. It was unbelievable. He was just like a I don't know how do you describe it, but just laser focused and was just unbelievable. It was relentless, and for whatever reason, just never got tired. I mean, he was not even a gym rat of any sort. But that whole tournament, you could have double shifted him and kept him on the ice for 50 minutes, and he wouldn't have got tired. But it was just something about his senior year, last kick at the can. This was just kind of, I'm going to go out and I'm going to, get through it. For us, our problem was getting through the quarterfinals. We could never get through the quarterfinals, and all of a sudden we got through the quarterfinals that year, and he was tournament MVP, just goal after goal and just shift after shift. And but
funny story. Check this out. So Mariana's senior year was during the transition year.
Okay.
So we went to we created this transition tournament.
Did you guys actually play an NAI schedule at all, or did you? Are you always in?
We were the 2010. We made the NAI tournament. We played almost an all Northern Sun schedule.
Okay.
I played everyone on their bye.
Okay.
And then because it was odd before, you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. But anyway, or the travel partner weekend or whatever. But the transition year, we had a tournament with all the schools in transition for D2.
Okay.
During the postseason, right? And Mariana pulled her hamstring.
Oof.
Or quad, one of the two, or glute, one of the three, right?
Yep.
Nothing. Yeah.
Yep.
And we were in the championship game, and the trainer ruled her out. I'm like, seriously, dude, it's her senior year.
Yeah.
It's not an injured knee.
No.
And she's crying, and I said, you're gonna play. And so I called the school, and whatever. Anyway, she played, right? We were losing 1-0, and she headed in 2 goals. She played center back, but she headed in, and she headed in the game-winning goal.
No way.
And it was just my last game.
Yep.
And
it's unbelievable.
And I'm sure it didn't wreck her life.
I know, absolutely not. But no, so to go back to what you said, so what? I mean, you're a coach. I mean, you bring in hire any coach for any sport. They do things their way, right? They come from a certain area. There's no secret for me. It's not like I was, biased towards only Canadians, but I was very familiar of where to get the Canadians, which leagues, what areas. I love Saskatchewan, Manitoba kids just because they were skilled and they were blue collar, lunch pail type, athletes, those type of things, which meshed well with my North Dakota kids. It's almost like you could think that those kids grew up in the same neighborhood. But how do you change that culture to when a guy gets hired or girl gets hired to a position, a coach, and you honestly look at their history of being not good, and we don't have to call out certain sports, but there's a few sports in Minot State that have absolutely struggled since the inception of Northern Sun, which we can have a whole nother show on the debate on the jump to Division II as a whole, which, whatever the pros and cons. But is that going to come from AD's got to legislate that through, or is that something where, how do you enforce what you're saying? Because I completely agree with you. I mean, especially if you're in a sport that is perpetually struggling, losing, whatever. What else do you have to lose?
Well,
you know what I mean?
There's a couple levels of that. Number one, I want you to think about this. I've been all over, pretty much every town in North Dakota.
For sure.
There are some towns where the kids love playing for their community. Rugby.
For sure.
Carrington, Hazen, Beulah, Kindred,
That was
Grafton.
another one. Yeah.
I mean, playing for Kindred or playing for like rugby is unbelievable. They have so much talent pride. Carrington has so much talent pride. You know, it's
We can see it from the TikToks, by the way.
What's
You
that?
can see it from the TikToks when you're in those gyms.
Yeah.
You know, it's where you go on a Friday
Velva.
night. It's
You know
where
what I
go.
mean? Like
Yeah.
these towns, Botno, they love their community. We need some of that to spill into the out of town kids that playing for Minot State, playing for Mary, playing for Valley City, Jamestown means something to them. And North Dakota people are just different. So if you hire a coach from out of town, they need to understand that you know, North Dakota, you know, that they believe in it takes a village, you know, to raise, and everyone's part of the village. You know, it means something that to love our, you know, love our state. And I think that, you know, having those kids, but I'll tell you this, you should not spend a penny unless it translates to wins, student athlete experience, or student athlete, you know, mental welfare.
Yeah.
Those are the only three things
Where the money should go.
where the money should go. If you can't equate, you know, and I'm not saying don't buy them swag. I mean, a hoodie fits into those equations. If you don't give them anything, they're not going to, you know, people aren't going to come. Your locker room is part of that. It does matter.
Yeah,
Your locker room should be nice. It should be clean, and then, you know, you know,
Something to be pride. You know, you want to go into that. You know,
create some pride. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. Recruiting obviously would translate to wins, right? So these are the things that should be tracked. But we should also track where you're recruiting, who you're recruiting, and are you actually getting those players? You know, and where are the players going? Are they going to Mayville, Mankato? You know, I mean, and that's what, you know, that's what they should be looking for. But my honest opinion is we don't have a metropolitan area, and that's not going to change in the next 100 years, right?
Yep.
Not going to happen. There is no metropolitan area for your like base role players that are just going to come to that school because it's close. But we have North Dakota as a whole, all of the Class Bs,
Absolutely.
all of the Class As.
But all the
And we
Agreed.
need to develop those kids.
But you would think for like Minot and Mary, there should be absolutely no reason for any way that a Class B kid would go to another Northern Sun school. As
But it happens.
It does. A perfect example. There was a fullback tight end kid from Botno that I knew the bus drivers. I knew his dad was a bus driver for us, would drive a couple of these trips. And his son played at Bemidji and was a backup for his first 2 years, and his red shirt and backup, and then his sophomore year, he was basically a starting special teams guy, and then his junior and senior year was a big time player. And Bemidji, this was probably 5-6 years ago, had some really good football teams. They were really good,
Yeah, they did.
and came from Botno. And I was like, wow, you know, Bemidji, like that's, you know, remarkable. And I said, you know, like I'm coaching Minot State. I'm on the bus talking to his dad, and I was like, you know, the Minot State just didn't offer enough money. He goes, didn't even make a phone call. And Mary didn't even make a phone call. He said that it was literally the NAI school, so it was like Jamestown, Valley City, and Bemidji was the only D2 school to give him a call, and they were all in, you know. And it's like, okay, let's forget. I'm like, how does that fall? Like, how does that happen? You know, like it just like there was a kid from Velva that went to Moorhead for football last year. Is it this year? Selzer, so whatever. We're going to like Moorhead. I'm like, we just talked about another one that's
Matt
going.
and Thorson.
Yeah.
But hey, look.
How do we
I mean,
get-
there's some Powers
you know?
Lake guys and stuff,
Yeah.
and there's guys on the
Yeah.
there's guys on the.
But we
Minot State
should win
football
those
team.
out. We should win on those ones, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and Mary's made a push for North Dakota kids.
They
They've
go
done a
500
decent-
this year, and their football team is like their best season they've had in like 10 years.
They've had a decent run. I mean, you know,
Their basketball team lost the Final Four. I mean, Jack Nelson and them. I mean, so you got to think something's right. But man, I tell you, Mary is holy buckets. You talk about investment. Holy Their all-time high enrollment. First of all, their student enrollment numbers are sky high, which is a huge indicator. Now you got more people to get these kids to go to the gyms and try to build that culture. But man, they're going through a massive, I don't know if it needed it or not, but they're spending a lot of money on facilities across the board. Everything's getting poured in cash. They got, I mean, it's just kind of, but it
But
feels,
Minot's already done that.
no, for sure.
Minot has some of the nicest
Yes,
facilities
for
in the
sure.
northern side.
But the problem though is that like in basketball, do you think that the dome in some respects is a detriment? We used to play at the all seasons. We average 1,000 fans a night. You play in a 4,500 seat arena, it looks empty. You move to the Pepsi rink, 1,000 fans looks pretty full. Does the dome hurt a little bit? Should they be doing more? You know, you
I
can
think they
sit in
should
certain
curtain off
sections.
the upper
Yeah,
deck.
yeah, absolutely. They do
Curtain
that in a
off
lot of
the
rinks.
upper deck, you know,
They
like
do.
they do for wrestling.
Yep.
You know, I think would help.
But you know what I mean. But in terms of that stuff, it's just, I just feel like it's something's gonna have to give here, right? I mean, you think about across the board a culture shift. I mean,
Well, they got
what-
a new AD coming, and I
Good-
hope that they have a focus on
Yes.
North Dakota kids.
Yes.
I also think there should be a focus on the, you know, the reservation high schools. There's a lot of pride in their
Yep.
athletes. Their athletes are, you know, athletic.
Do you think they got overlooked?
I think.
mean,
that,
culturally
I,
overlooked,
No,
you know,
I do.
you
I
know?
think they do. You know, and I think that.
And you're seeing them at all these events. I mean, you're seeing them at track meets and crap.
I mean,
I think it's unbelievable.
Newtown's got good runners. You know, obviously Four Winds has great basketball players. You know, where's Azura Rainbow going? You know, maybe next week we should have her on the show.
There we go.
You know what I mean? Where is she going? Because she could
Absolutely.
absolutely play underneath.
But you can't tell me that, you know, some of these larger sports where they do have lots of roster spots, and it's not like everybody's going to get a scholarship. And I think there has to be a level of expectations. It's not like some of these kids are just, you know, they're getting a full boat to go to NDSU. It's like, no, there's some kids that you need to build that culture, because I would think for you and your program and your success, you know, of course you've got your athletes that are, you know, your whatever you want to call them, starters, your studs or whatever, and those ones getting money. But you still have to have walk-ons. You have to have people that are not getting scholarship, that you've been able to get good ones to fill in there, like that are going to be like NDSU, same thing. Not every football player at NDSU is on a scholarship right now, but man, their depth's unbelievable. And they do have those kids that want to go to that school and play. And UND's now experiencing too. You know, they've had some success, and now they know where the bar is, moving into the new conference. But
One thing I did was our practices were long, but we'd
I'm
roll
glad I
our
wasn't one of your athletes.
we'd roll our A's out,
Yep.
and they would leave early. Our B's would come in a little later, and then
Mm-hmm.
the C's would come in. But what we did was we tried to give the kid who was the third line the same reps as the first line,
Okay.
and I think that helps with retention.
Development
I
too.
mean, they have a chance to show. And then when they're, you know, when someone gets hurt and you have to plug someone in, they have the same amount of reps. And it matters.
Absolutely. Would you have the same length in practices all the way to the bitter end of the season? Or do you shorten them up a
No,
little
as
bit?
the end of the year would go. I mean, it would shorten for everybody, though. We
Yeah.
don't want anyone tired.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, you know, it didn't cost the athletes anything. The coaches are the ones that are, you know, for a long time. Mm-hmm. The athletes are there for a short amount of time, and it's all overlap. So you get 11.
Would you just be absolutely just running them into the trenches, or do you like, you know, your practice style is like military, or were you like, you know, incorporate some scrimmage, or we call them small area games where you're still battling? We like to battle a lot, or what?
I like battling all the time, but I mean, from small to large groups.
Yeah.
I do believe in playing 11v11 almost every day, but I like to use live situations.
For sure.
So, like, what do you do if the ball, you know, ends up here? What do you do if the ball? And I would just
Situational
knock
awareness.
a ball, knock a ball, knock
Yep.
a ball, knock a ball, and then we
Situational
play,
awareness.
and you just watch everyone move, you know, and then you can film it and you can tell people like,
Would you kill it? You know, mid drill if things are out of
oh
place or
yeah,
anything?
yeah.
But I mean, you know, clearly though it worked, right? It absolutely worked. I mean, it's just one of those things that's the recipe of success. And I just feel like do you think that the coaches just need to be patient, or they need to, you know, check their egos and say, okay, I've recruited athletes from, you know, some of these bigger states, you know, in the South, that these kids here in North Dakota aren't good enough. Is it an ego thing? Is it patience?
I think all the coaches
know?
are trying to win. I'm just saying that I think that
No,
that,
of course
that a
not.
North
No,
Dakota
yeah.
kid for 4 years is better than a kid from out of state for 1 year.
No.
I'm only talking role players. I do believe, and think about it, Mary about 4 years ago put an emphasis on North Dakota kids, and they had their best football and basketball seasons since they've gone Division Two. You know, and they've done a good job of it. Minot needs to take that mindset.
So you think that'll be one of the biggest challenges for the new AD, whoever it is at Minot State? Like they're going to have to put it.
And we can't just not recruit the East Side.
Yeah.
Minot State is, and their facilities, and Mary are nice.
They are.
I think if once you get to kind of Carrington, I don't know that they know.
How nice they are.
I think they think Minot State's a little tiny school like Mayville or Valley City. You know, and I think that, you know, they need to get to the East Side. You know, and I drove Washburn, Wilton, Shiloh, Valley City, Fargo, Grand Forks, Minto, Langford, Cando, Rugby in one weekend. You know, I mean, it's doable. You can do it.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it is what it is. But, you know, some of my best friends here in North Dakota were former student athletes and they're boosters now, like Jerry Obenauer, Jason Obenauer, Hazen guys. You know what I mean? And they're giving back to their community in Hazen. Absolutely. They give back to Minot State.
They
you know, these are the kinds of people.
Absolutely, they are.
That need to be focused on.
Well, and that's who that's all I hung out with in college. I mean, a lot of these guys are here. Guys that are like working at banks and they're working at businesses, oil field guys. I mean, it's crazy. It's one of those things where, I mean, geez, even in our agency, we just hired Brian Erickson to play at Minot State in the early 2000s, you know, agent with us. You know, like there's a lot of these guys that will gravitate, and that's what you want. Like you talk about the small towns and how they come together. The same mentality at a macro scale, and being able to do that, because if you got guys that are, you know, went to Minot State, prideful, become business owners, become boosters, it just cycles in more money. And then, of course, the biggest thing is that your biggest recruiting tool is now these guys are old enough, their kids are good, you know, and you want to have there's absolutely no way that like, was it Gabby Bull? Like, who was an absolute stud at Bishop Ryan goes to Mary. Like, I mean, that just feels like it's, and I think, I don't know how that went down, but I'm like, oh my God, like what a deal that is to get an absolute stud.
What a feather in Mary's cap for working hard on that.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, and think about this. Think about this when we're talking recruiting, Class Bs, you know, here in North Dakota. Zach Hendrickson, Region Player of the Year for football, Region Player of the Year for basketball, District MVP, and he's probably shortly going to be named Region Player of the Year in golf. And he doesn't have offers for Mary or Minot, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, these are the kind of kids that he's not going to be the end all.
You don't know that though.
MVP of the Northern Sun.
You don't know that.
Maybe not. I mean, you know, we're just looking at size.
Talk with Tyler Rudolph. You know, hey, it happened. So
he's 6'5".
Yeah.
But you know, but are these the kind of kids that fit this mold of what we're talking about? Region Player of the Year, 3 sports.
Yep.
You know, so.
But do you think but here's the other thing too: is it becomes a snowball effect, right? So you get him, you develop him, has a average to above average career at Minot State, but lo and behold, 3 years behind him is another kid that ends up being a much better athlete, but came from the same region, same school. All of a sudden looks and says, Minot State makes a call. You know, Hendrickson had a great experience there. Maybe I should actually marry or whatever. You know
so think about this with Hendrickson, though. Maybe he's never all conference, right? But maybe gets you through tournament games come senior year, like you were talking about. Maybe he goes Daniel Lamb on everybody. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So.
No, I think that's a big part of it, and I want to hear what people want to say about it too. You know what? I think this is a pretty touchy, quiet subject that not a whole lot of people talk about. They talk about it in maybe the coffee shops, but that's it. It doesn't get outside. I think it should be public. I want to know what people's thoughts are, you know, in terms of that stuff. So be good to hear.
Well, this is what you have. This is our high school / kind of college segment. I've been around the state. I love North Dakota high school athletics. We've put our time into it.
Yep.
I'd
like to hear what the people say too. I want to get some feedback.
Let us know. But I believe that the 2 Division II schools in North Dakota, there are diamonds out there in Class A and Class B that aren't being seen, and I think those are the guys that that brace these rosters up and to get Marion Minot to the next level. And Jack Nelson has done it.
Yep. Absolutely.
And the Merkin's best player was a North Dakota kid.
Absolutely.
The all-time leading scorer for women's soccer was Minot kid.
Yep.
Sophia Lewis. I do believe these North Dakota kids get us to the next level out here in the West.
Another great episode. Took a big dive into some recruiting, some local athletes, particularly with Marion Minot State. Great chat with Spainer. We definitely want to hear your opinions on that. You know what? We got some state track. We got a golf in there too as well. Spainer going to be falling all over. Make sure you check him out on TikTok. You know where to find us on all the platforms. Another great episode here on the Spainer Riggs podcast, brought to you by the Dakota.